When a loved one dies at the hospital, the last thing you would expect is for parts of their body to be tossed out without the family's permission. But tonight, that is exactly what a Polk County woman is coming to terms with. Brandy Lyles reached out to News Channel 8 exclusively after a jury ruled in her favor this month against Winter Haven Hospital. She was awarded millions in connection with the death of her mother. And as Jennifer Leigh explains in this 8 on Your Side investigation, the details of this case are staggering.
Brandy Lyles hopes she's closing in on the end of a 7-year nightmare. The 31-year-old Polk County woman is still mourning the death of her mother, Sharon Diane Sutka, who was just 49 when she passed away Easter Sunday, 2005 at Winter Haven Hospital.
She was perfectly healthy. We had just went to the park the day before.
Brandy was out of town when her mom went to Winter Haven Hospital's ER with stomach pains. She says she spoke to her by phone several times, even after Sutka was admitted for testing.
And then I received a call around 2:30 that morning from a doctor, and the doctor said that she passed away and we did not know why. And I was very upset. I was very shocked.
But that, it turns out, would be just the beginning of the story for Brandy. An initial autopsy, which she authorized, signing a 1-page consent form the hospital gave her, came back initially inconclusive and ultimately with the cause of death, respiratory failure.
I actually just let them know I did want a second autopsy, and I wasn't happy with the results. And at that point, they told me that they could not give me a second autopsy because her internal organs were incinerated.
To me, growing up here, it was a community disgrace.
Lance Holden is Brandy Lyles' attorney, hired after Brandy realized not only would she never get the chance to find out why her mother died, she also would never be able to bury her, all of her, because Sutka's internal organs were destroyed without Brandy's permission.
The hospital and the pathologist took the position that, well, the organs, those were just biohazardous waste. To Brandy and her family, that was her mom, that was a loved one.
Fast forward to September of 2012, and a Polk County jury awarded Brandy $2 million in a lawsuit against Winter Haven Hospital, pathologist Philip Gordon, and Ridge Pathology Consultants for extreme and outrageous conduct that caused severe emotional distress.
The jury has the right, through Florida law, to speak up for the community and say, you were wrong, Winter Haven Hospital. You were wrong, Dr. Gordon. You were wrong, Ridge Pathology. We want you to stop. And that's what they did.
But much more came out during the trial, information that made Brandy's loss even more devastating. According to court records, an environmental aide for Winter Haven Hospital testified not only did he take human remains, organs, in red biohazard bags to be incinerated at the hospital, he also took what's known as white bag trash.
And then they went through the kitchen and took a white bag and got the food off the tables. They would sweep the floors and put cigarette butts in there. All those bags went in together into the incinerator. Flames hit the bags, everything goes up, it's burned, it's cremated, and then just goes out to landfill somewhere.
Polk County's chief medical examiner, Dr. Stephen Nelson, who was called as an expert witness, testified, quote, "I'm not aware of a single solitary hospital where an environmental aide, according to their testimony, comes in and admixes the materials from the autopsy room in with the same materials from the cafeteria. I'm not aware of any place in the free world that does that." Dr. Nelson also testified, quote, "We're talking about portions of someone's body, taken from autopsy, incinerated with the rest of the hospital's trash. That, quite frankly, is outrageous." What did not come out during trial, according to Brandy and her attorney, is whether or not Winter Haven Hospital is still conducting autopsies the same way, which is why they are now telling us their story.
I wouldn't want anyone else to go through what I go through, what I've been through, and what I'm going to go through in the future. This is something that's going to live with me forever, and I'm afraid that someone else out there might go through it, and it's heartbreaking.
Now here at 8 on Your Side, we work very hard to get you answers, and here are some of the questions we have tonight. Why did Winter Haven Hospital destroy those organs? How long has this policy been in place, and is it still Winter Haven Hospital's policy to incinerate organs after autopsy? And most importantly, why did they incinerate autopsied organs with common hospital trash? And Keith, I would love to be able to give you those answers, but I simply can't tonight, and that's because after a week of attempting to reach out to Winter Haven Hospital by telephone, by email to them, their representatives, their attorneys, no one has responded to us.
Based on what you've shared with us, I can see why the jury ruled the way it did, but I'm sure a lot of people watching are also thinking, well, why don't they tell you more? Why doesn't Winter Haven explain a little bit more to you? It almost sounds like a cover-up by not sharing information.
Well, right, and normally we would get some sort of response suggesting that we're not going to respond or we're not going to comment, but we've heard nothing, and that's a very natural response, I think, is to wonder what's up with that.
And you kind of touched on it there at the end of the story, but Sharon Sutka's case, you have to wonder if it is isolated. Again, how do you know if it's not?
Well, based on the testimony and the records that we have reviewed, this was a common practice to incinerate, again, those red-bagged organs with white-bagged hospital trash. We also know there was another very similar lawsuit filed against Winter Haven Hospital, but again, we don't know if the practice continues to this day or how many autopsied organs we could be talking about over time. We're on it, though. We're going to keep trying to get a response from the hospital.
All right. Jen Leigh, thanks for bringing it to our attention.
You got it.
Tonight, an update to an 8 on your side investigation into shocking practices at Winter Haven Hospital in Polk County. We first told you about a young woman who won a multi-million-dollar judgment against the hospital. That facility had incinerated her mother's organs after an autopsy without permission. Well, get this. Now, another woman is speaking out, and she's telling News Channel 8's Jennifer Leigh that Winter Haven Hospital did the same thing to her husband's body.
David and Carol Cresson had 32 years together, a love story cut prematurely short July 20th, 2006.
He was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he was in and out of the hospital probably for the last 8 months of his life.
Carol took her husband to Winter Haven Hospital not because of the cancer, which doctors told him was survivable, but because of dehydration, which inexplicably spiraled to something more serious.
He went down very, very quick. I kept asking the doctors, what is going on? Why is he doing what he's doing? And nobody would answer my questions.
David Cresson didn't survive that stay in the hospital. Carol immediately asked for an autopsy, buried the love of her life next to a son they lost to an accident in 2000, and then waited for answers. What she got instead was a shock. An autopsy report dated 3 days before her husband's death. It also said he was well nourished, despite the fact he'd actually lost nearly 25 pounds because of his cancer treatment.
Well, reading an autopsy report is very hard to do, and you almost have to be a doctor to read those. So I'm thinking to myself, if they've made these mistakes on dating it 3 days before he died, what other mistakes that I can't read and hear is wrong?
So even though her husband was already buried, she asked her funeral home director how to get a second autopsy.
When he said, Ms. Cresson, he said, I hate to tell you this, but we can't get a second opinion on your husband. And I said, why? He said, because they only sent his shell over.
David's organs didn't go with him, and his case isn't the first for Winter Haven Hospital. Court records show the hospital incinerated the organs of another patient, Sharon Sutka, after an autopsy without permission back in 2005. Sharon Sutka's daughter, Brandy Lyles, filed a lawsuit winning a $2 million judgment against the hospital, pathologist, and pathology lab for her mother's case. And her lawyers, the same team that now represents Carol Cresson, put the hospital on notice 2 weeks before David Cresson's death. The practice was outrageous, and they threatened to sue.
I took both of these cases under the theory that right is right and wrong is wrong. And it's not a close call.
Wes Brennan is Carol Cresson's lawyer. He says the practice of incinerating organs after autopsy was Winter Haven Hospital policy for decades.
The math adds up to over 700 autopsies, and that's over 700 families who have no idea that this may very well have happened to their loved one.
Is this about finding other victims to represent for you?
I personally didn't call you and ask you to come interview me. No, I'm not looking for anything for me. I'm answering your questions for Carol. I represent Carol.
Court records do show hospital maintenance staff not only burned biohazardous red-bagged organs, but also white-bagged common hospital trash together, sending the combined ashes to a landfill. Carol Cresson, who worked at Winter Haven Hospital at the time of her husband's death, says she was never aware of such a policy and is outraged it happened to her and who knows how many others which is why she hopes her lawsuit sends Winter Haven Hospital a message.
I want them to know that they were wrong. I want them to admit that they were wrong. And I want them to stop.
Carol Crisson has reached a settlement with the pathologist and the pathology lab in her husband's case, but her lawsuit against Winter Haven Hospital is still making its way through the courts. Winter Haven Hospital, for its part, continues to remain mum on this issue. We've made repeated attempts to speak to administrators and lawyers for the hospital, and so far, no one has responded to our emails, calls, or our requests for interviews.
Well, here we've done 2 stories, very similar in nature, but these could be isolated cases. I mean, wouldn't more families come forward if they knew that this sort of thing was happening?
Well, let me break down exactly what we know for you in comparison to these 2 cases. The common denominator in both of these cases is that each family wanted a second autopsy. Carol Crisson's legal team suggests there could be hundreds of families who didn't ask for a second opinion and simply don't know they didn't get their loved one's organs back. Also, these 2 cases involved 2 different pathologists. So again, the victims claim it looks a lot more like a policy or a common practice than simply 2 isolated events simply perpetrated by one pathologist. These are 2 different doctors we're talking about here.
And we could say, well, it's not the policy. Had Winter Haven shared that with us, but we don't know because Winter Haven's not talking.
They won't respond, not even as much as a no comment or an ongoing investigation or this is in the courts, nothing.
All right. Thank you, Jen.
You got it.